All right. Well, if you made it to this week's episode, I have good news for you. Um, we sort of left things off on a cliffhanger last episode, and I'm happy to report back that Brandon is in fact still alive.
Woo!
Give it up for Brandon, bro. Brandon, how you
He's
feel? How you
alive.
feel this week?
I feel great. I am.
Yeah?
I don't have a throat issue anymore.
You don't have a throat?
I, I'm not currently bleeding out of my nose or
Or leaking Gatorade?
leaking orange Gatorade.
No other funny colors. Just
No, just standard
snot's been gone
green
back.
and yellow and
Green
purple,
and yellow.
and
Purple.
blue.
What the fuck?
Blue.
Okay.
Just the
well,
standard stuff.
Stay tuned next week. We're gonna have a Brandon's health update every week now.
It's like
Just-
David Lynch's weather report. It's like
Yeah.
today
Every stacked
is
episode.
And if you can believe it,
Believe it. Brandon
orange
is healthy
Gatorade once again.
He's as healthy as an ox. Cool. All right. Well, welcome back to Stacked episode 118. The most important episode of this show. I don't know. Maybe. We'll see.
every episode.
Who knows?
is important.
Who knows? We're talking. Okay, we have a subject for today, but I'm gonna have our dear friend Brandon here explain to us Brandon. I want you to tell us what you thought the subject was when I originally sent out the text of what it was gonna be a week ago.
Mhm.
Can you please?
Well, it was Labor
take us
Day,
through-
right?
No.
No, it wasn't. What
No,
the-
Labor Day was a while ago, bro. It
Okay.
was. It was I think it was Thursday.
I think
It was last Thursday.
okay.
Yeah.
Well, I remember reading over the text, and I must have been like too busy to really read anything.
Such a
But
busy guy. Yeah.
I the text said a fun topic I thought of a minute ago that we could do is films with the best world building.
Yes.
And there's no
Yeah.
hyphen between world or building, or it's not one word. So I read it as the best buildings, like the world.
the world?
Yeah.
Like, we weren't even gonna talk about movies.
And then no. I thought
The
like
Sears
films-
Tower in New York is actually my favorite building, and if I were to check it out of a video store, I would.
And then I read Chris's text, and because I was like, oh yeah, Thursday should work, yeah. And then it's like, okay, cool, let's plan for Thursday at 8 p.m. Theme is best world building. And I was like, oh,
Yeah.
for movies. Best, like, I was going to ask for specification, but I was like, I could get creative with this, I've got, like,
Yeah.
their movies.
But bro, you know what
Can I-
world building is.
And then this morning, I was making the list and going through, and I was like, wait, can it be like a fictional like building? Does it have to be real? And I texted our group chat. I go, hey guys, I made
Can
this
this
list.
can this be fictional buildings?
And then
And
Ethan and I
Ethan's
were like,
what?
I want you to know, I woke up to your text, and I remember just looking at it and being like, wait, wait, what? And then I connected the dots. I was like, oh, Brandon had a misunderstanding.
Ugh.
Well, I was. Can I tell you guys what my picks would have been if it was the best?
I would love-
honestly, yes, please. And I have a few of my own because I thought of this. Please
There's the Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol Burj
Of
Khalifa
course, Burj
scene.
Khalifa.
I thought, oh, Truman Show, like the dome's kind of a building that
The
they're
dome.
in.
The dome.
Did you put the dome from the Simpsons movie too?
The Simpsons movie, yeah.
No, it was not on there. I had Die Hard, Nakatomi Tower.
Yeah.
I had the Parasite Home. I had the High Life, I think it's High Rise Apartment system, and I had King Kong Empire State Building, Dread, The Raid, all of those.
Maybe we should do the stack one day.
Yeah, eventually, but I just gave away all the answers.
Best movie. No. They'll forget. Nobody listens to this show. All right. So, yes, we are doing movies with with what we believe are the best world building. Now, Brandon, can you tell us what world building? No, I'm gonna let Chris explain.
No,
Chris.
I know what it is.
No, you've been talking too much. I already asked you. Chris hasn't talked enough. Chris, tell us what is world building. You know?
Well, when I first got this prompt, my first thoughts were there were many. Like I don't know about you guys, but in my experience with this prompt, it was actually really easy to gather options, but it was hard to distill those options down to like the best because there's a lot of movies that do a really good job at world building. And so at first I was thinking like, okay, there's obvious like sci-fi. I feel like this prompt sci-fi and fantasy films benefit from it just because naturally you have to kind of build that world from scratch because we don't have a real frame of reference.
It impresses you more because it's something out of nothing.
Yeah, but then again, there's also like, for example, period pieces you could argue as world building because even though they're not constructing it from scratch, they're constructing a recreation, which is nonetheless world building.
Like Benjamin Button.
Honestly, yeah, that is a period piece.
Like Ip Man.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, Ip Man is also a period piece, 1930s. But yeah, so like I started kind of just going through a list and just seeing what was out there. Granted, yes, there is a lot of sci-fi in my bunch, but there's also a lot of just like fantasy stuff, and like period pieces and things like that. So I'm excited to share this list. This is I think we've talked about it, but all three of us are big sci-fi people. We all really like these we all love genre films.
Yeah.
So I think we're going to be bringing up some really great craftsmanship today, I think.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, should we start with the most obvious and go for a science fiction film? Talk about our favorite like science fiction worlds.
Why don't let's get the obvious, the big stuff out of the way.
Because as you said, Chris, it's when we see a world, that is fictional, that has never existed, created in front of our eyes, and we're able to believe and believe that these characters exist in that space, and
Mm-hmm.
that we as the viewer get a sense of space. It typically for me it's a lot more rewarding for films that just sort of there are fantastic films with world building that are very contemporary and take place in like our world,
Mm-hmm.
and I'll talk about some later, but when we're speaking about just entirely brand new worlds or reimagined worlds, which is what I want to start with, which is a reimagined world, which is, I think my favorite film with the best world building is Ridley Scott's Blade Runner.
Blade Runner, yep, that's my number one too.
Just the the tangibility of it all, and how practical it was for back in 1982, that lends a hand to it. But just you understand the evolution from the LA that we know or knew back, in the 80s and 70s and 60s.
Yeah.
How this, like, if our world went through the same changes as the Blade Runner world, how it would get to how it looked and how it feels then,
Mm-hmm.
Everyone says, it's very influenced by Eastern sort of architecture, and and lighting and culture, and honestly that kind of makes sense because it is a Pacific Coast city,
Mm-hmm.
it would make more sense for this to look that way than for Denver, Colorado, Denver, Colorado 2049 to look, or whatever,
Can we rewrite it to make it about?
Let's write a movie. I wonder what other states look like in the Blade Runner world. That would be. They should. I don't know. No, I don't. Maybe they shouldn't touch Blade Runner at all.
But the thing is like with science fiction movies, they never touch like underpopulated areas. Like it's often just the coastal cities,
Yeah, it's always because this genre of cyberpunk, it's always in these dense urban cities like Los Angeles, for example. In the case of Blade Runner.
I do have a science fiction film that kind of I'll get into it after you, Ethan, but I just want to mention it kind of delves into this.
Yeah.
This split dichotomy between
also
types of worlds.
In 2049, like he goes to Las Vegas, which it's a big city, but it's not like a mega city like LA or New York or something. Um
Right.
and he also goes out to like the solar farms and all the farms that are like in between LA and Las Vegas, the outskirts of California. Um
Yeah.
but it's just cool, Chris. I know you're with me on this.
Yeah. Oh man, I mean, what is there to say about
Spill.
Blade Runner beyond like what you've already said? Like the world building is fucking amazing. I remember like watching this movie when I was in high school for the first time and being really taken aback by the density of this movie. I mean, like on top of just like visually the way it is, but also even just like in its themes on humanity and finding our humanity in like this kind of puzzling world that is like the cyberpunk future. Cyberpunk, I think, is also such an interesting setting for any kind of film. I think it's like humans taken to a maximalist level, which I think is a really great place to put a character who is searching for humanity. Which is basically that's what the crux of the Blade Runner films are about.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really dig these movies. And like it's also like I take so much pride in Blade Runner 2049 because I mean even just the title, you hear that you might without seeing the movie you might think like okay, some contrived sequel nonsense. But
Yeah.
no, it's fucking good. Like
It's
we all three of us here dig 2049. Brandon and I actually like it a bit more than the first one.
Yep.
But Ethan, like they're neck and neck for you.
they're
They're really
literally
close.
they're like both in my like top 50 films of all time.
Yeah.
They're so close.
I haven't watched
Um,
the original in so long though, so I feel
oh,
like
bro,
it's
it's
due.
good.
It's due for.
And you haven't watched the final cut. You've never seen the
Yeah.
final cut.
I've seen the
Oh,
one
bro,
that everybody doesn't like, and I thought it was okay, but like a
the
6
ending,
out of
then
10.
the new ending is so much more resonant to me. I mean,
Yeah.
new ending, the final cut ending.
So
Yeah. Brandon, what's that movie that you wanted to bring up?
Yeah, bro.
it's more of a series actually.
Okay.
I am gonna say that the Hunger Games series does a really good job at world building.
You know,
Oh.
I can give it that. I can
Because-
give the Hunger Games series that.
Regardless of how you may feel about the actual films themselves, I think one of the hats one of the like pins you could put in the hat or feathers you could put in the cap. I don't know the phrase. Of the Hunger Games series.
Feathers in a cap?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
the
okay.
feather, the little feather in my. It's something. I know.
Yeah.
I know what you're talking about, Brandon.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's okay.
Like,
If someone gets mad at you for that, they're mad at us because we don't know it at all. So.
Well, I think that series kind of nails this. The more lived in world, it's larger. Whereas, like when you're condensing science fiction, and I'm gonna let you guys know now. I think I'm not gonna choose a film like Star Wars. I think it has some of the worst world building,
Whoa.
especially in the modern era.
I wasn't gonna talk about it either, just because I thought it was too obvious. I don't want to waste people's time.
I think because if you have like a science fiction film, like it can be so self-contained, like it is for Star Wars. And unfortunately, they just keep finding ways to shrink the universe that is. Whereas even with a film that takes place exclusively on one planet in one country, with the Hunger Games series, you have these different districts that are all detailed with different agriculture, different types of different climates and productions, and what they do is all like driven towards this goal of providing for the nation as a whole. And it is like a fascistic sort of organization, but at least you get to see like the wide range of it through all 4 movies without it focusing all the time on it, and it feels so natural and progressive with it.
Yeah.
Because it's not just the coastal cities, and there is fictional technology that is futuristic, but it isn't necessarily like Blade Runner-esque. Like it's not trying to pull from like this neon aesthetic that is very commonly seen.
Yeah.
Which I appreciate. So I love films like that feel lived in, that feel full, and that I would love if they expanded more into like the
Mhm.
before, the after, the during. And I'm glad that they're doing that, even if, it is based on a young adult franchise of novels. Because I do really like the books. The movies I like, but the second one's the only one I really like. So
Hmm.
Yeah, I know people are a fan of the Hunger Games. I don't think I could ever really consider myself a fan. I read the first book. No, I didn't. I was supposed to in school, and then I just watched the movie instead, and I passed all the tests on it.
it's very, very faithful
Very
adaptation.
faithful. And the first movie's okay. The second movie's fine, and then I didn't see any of the other ones. But do they explore more of the districts in the other ones? Because that was like the
They
thing in the
do.
first two movies. I was like, you're saying that these are all different, but I'm not seeing them.
They do.
But they
It's
do.
like
Okay.
because it's like the first two are very similar movies. I think the second one just has more depth and more of a budget than the first film did.
Yeah.
And there's like a political intrigue behind everything, whereas the political intrigue in the first one is kind of subdued. Whereas the third and fourth one are more like they're not the same story as the first two. And I think that irritated probably a bunch of kids who come in and expect, oh, I just want to see the death games every time, expecting a battle royale.
Like Fortnite.
Um no, like the movie Battle Royale.
Oh.
and and like the third and fourth one are more like revolutionary tales, so they go through the districts who are like rebelling against the capital, against that government and that wealth, because it's the haves and the have-nots.
Right.
And you get to see like what industry kind of rules every district and what they do for the capital that would
Yeah.
that would literally take away from them if they were to secede, essentially, which I think is very interesting. Now, is it as like glossy and colorful as you'd like? No. Are they all different? No, but there is some differences there. They're good.
All right. Well, glad this one got a shout out.
Yeah.
Does anybody else want to like spill out some other sci-fi worlds that they love before we sort of
Sure.
switch it to a next category? I got a few first. Nazca, the Valley of the Wind, I think is fantastic.
That one's very fun. That was a very fun movie
Fantastic
to watch
world
together.
building. RoboCop, I think, is really good world building and very good satirical world building.
Sequel's better.
The sequel, you mean the remake? RoboCop
The
2
remake,
is not
sorry.
better
The,
than the
the
first
sequel,
RoboCop.
RoboCop
What are you
2 and
talking
3
The
are
I
awful.
like the remake.
Planet of the Apes, I think the world building's
Oh,
really
that's
good.
so good.
I didn't even
So
think
good.
about that.
Yeah. I guess Evangelion counts, I'll do Evangelion 3.0 plus 1.0 cuz I think that version of the Evangelion world is like crazy. And super complex. And I'll do one more, and that is, where was it? You know what? No, oh yeah, of course. This is the first one I thought of. The Dark Crystal. I have to shout out this one. Because it is Brandon's what? Dude, you gotta admit the world buildings are fantastic in that movie. Just the way that every piece of that world is alive and is a puppet. I'm working on a video essay right now. I don't know if it's ever gonna come out because my computer keeps crashing every time I try to edit it. But I've recorded it and I'm just trying to get footage for it. But my computer keeps crashing. I'm working on a video essay about the Dark Crystal, and I talk about just like there's so many shots in the film that are just like trying to deliver fantastic world building by just like insert shots of these forests and these castles and these caves, and B, how all the puppeteers have a hand to play in just the set design, because they're, like I said, everything in this world is alive and is being puppeteered by something, and it blows my mind. It's film formalism at its best. That's basically what my argument in my video essay is. Spoilers. Love it. I know Brandon's not the biggest fan of it. Chris, I don't think you've seen it, but that's the last one I want to talk about. If you guys list some sci-fi worlds or fantasy worlds, please.
I'll go ahead here. I think, well, Brennan, your pick for Hunger Games got me thinking about those young adult like novels that got adapted to movies. I feel like the 2010s went through like a fad where it was just like all about it. But I think in terms of world building, Hunger Games trumps the rest. I mean, but then again, the competition's like what Divergent. You guys ever
And
seen
Maze
those
Runner.
movies? And Maze
I
Runner.
I read the first Divergent book. I remember reading that, but
Yeah,
I
it's
didn't
not as
watch
well
the movie.
developed. What's
I
the name of
think
the
it's the
yeah.
execution is like not as good as the like that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I have a couple of sci-fi movies. I'm gonna list out. Let's see.
I have a few as well.
Yeah. I'm gonna go for. I'll go with this one first. Let's go with. Let's go with Dune. I haven't talked about Dune. Um, I really love Dune. I didn't realize how much I would like Dune until I saw the Denis version of it. Um, honestly, this um, Denis Villeneuve's Dune reminds me a lot of like the first like maybe couple of seasons of Game of Thrones, which is also a really good world building series. Yeah, Dune is amazing. I think the scope, I mean, on top of the scope and scale of it, I think just like the nuances of like royal families and the Imperium and all of like the economics and the politics and all of that stuff is conveyed so well in these films that like you could kind of get behind the belief that this may exist. Like, not literally, of course, but everything is so it's not like there's so many out there lore elements in Dune. I mean, you have the planet itself and like the creatures and everything, but also it's a very grounded story about families warring and truth and the nature of destiny and the nature of belief in relation to politics and whatnot. It's such a dense movie, which is why I'm so excited to see Dune 2 and fingers crossed that Denis is given what he needs to make Dune Messiah, because that would be
Yeah,
wild if he actually gets to do that. Um, but yeah, I really love Dune. I know you guys do too. And
yeah.
Dune also directed by a very, very prolific sci-fi director today.
A great world
Um,
builder.
Great
Honestly,
world
I think
builder,
all of the world
absolutely.
building in all of his films are absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, he is wonderful. God, he's Denis Villeneuve, man. He's the man.
Yeah.
Um, Other sci-fi films, Akira, I think is
Oh,
amazing.
damn. Yeah, of
Tonally,
course.
visually, and just like what it's saying about like destruction, self-destruction,
Right.
Japanese culture, and how it's been shaped around the elephant in the room that is the bomb. Um,
Don't call it
and
the elephant in the room.
um, but
Awkward.
then okay, but then there's also like God, it's also a great story about friendship and freedom, and it's about so many different things that is so like immersed within Japanese society that I
Yeah.
think that's why I think it has remained a relevant piece of film since 1988.
Hmm.
Um, last sci-fi film I'll throw on before I hand it over to Brandon. This is much more tame in comparison to a lot of the more out there stuff that we've been talking about so far, like Blade Runner and whatnot. Um, Her. I think Her is a
Ah,
beautifully
sweet.
constructed world.
That's very
Yeah.
good.
Oh yeah.
It's so simple and like, but it's so believable because like I guarantee you, all of the technology that's in that movie will come to our world within the next 5 years. I could see an AI and a human falling in love for real in the next few years.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, out there somewhere, there's got to be someone.
Yeah.
Um,
Maybe on this
yeah,
very
and
show.
hey, who knows? Hey,
Who
I'm not
knows?
judging. Um, but yeah, this movie's so sweet. I love it, and like the production design lends so well to it. It feels so like beautiful and organic, but also kind of artificial too.
Yeah.
Which I think speaks volumes about the movie's relationship to like the current condition of being a modern human. Kind of searching for what Theodore, the character of Joaquin, is searching for in his life.
Hmm.
Um, God, I fucking love Her. God, that's such a good movie. Um, okay, Brandon,
Yeah.
let's hear from you.
Take it,
I'm
boy.
shocked neither of you guys mentioned the Avatar movies.
Oh,
I think
yeah, yeah,
I think
yeah. That's
Cameron
fucking
is
good.
because he
He is
made
the world guy.
he built like a world and a language and like a people's culture. And yes, I think you could say like he pulled from like our reality.
Certainly, yeah,
Yeah, but like I think that is part of world building, as to make a
absolutely.
culture somewhat familiar, you know. Same goes for also, I have a subtle example, District 9.
I haven't
Mm.
seen this movie. It kept popping up on lists though.
You haven't
Yeah,
seen it?
Mm-mm.
Wow,
that's crazy
it's a good
actually.
one.
It's a really good statement on like race relations and like segregation and stuff like that. But
Colonialism.
yeah, first contact narratives never get much better than this one, and more political than this one.
Yeah.
Kind of sad that it's been so shafted because Neil Blomkamp sucks as a director.
Yeah. Go see Gran Turismo in theaters now.
But I think that's a good one because, like, again, you have to develop a whole society. Granted, you use little pieces from real life history
Yeah.
to create said world, but it's good. Snowpiercer, one of my favorites, very self-contained and small, but still impressive because when you have to put it all within one compact space that's always moving, that always provides room for more creativity
Mm-hmm.
and something that's more exciting. And then another small scale one, but it's how the future should look, is Ad Astra.
Adastra.
Yeah,
Ad Astra.
Adastra.
Ad Astra.
Yeah.
Ad Astra. But
Adastra.
that Ad Astra.
Adastra.
Dastardly Dan. Yeah, that one.
Dastardly.
Well, it's just because like that film is so good at like portraying like what a future society with space travel could look like.
Yeah.
You know, different colonies, products like integration and like product placement in real life.
Oh yeah,
And
wasn't there like an Applebee's on the moon or something?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That was amazing.
But like the technology wasn't super futuristic, but it felt lived in and it didn't feel like cold and isolated. In the way that it wasn't supposed to regarding his relationship with his father. But, you know, I digress. Just really good stuff there. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, and before we move on, I can't believe I forgot this one because the world building Ad Astra reminds me of probably my favorite piece of fiction ever, Cowboy Bebop. I can talk about it because it's on Letterboxd, and there's a Cowboy Bebop movie. That is what a incredible sort of realization of life. I think it's like 700 years from now, and where we've achieved space travel and how cultures create a melting pot on colonies on other planets and everything, and the tricks they use to like adapt to the sort of the climates there on each planet. Fantastic movie and series. Okay, so next I want to talk about, because I feel like world building in in real life movies, movies that take place in our world are very much impressive too, because usually when these films, and I find it's more with dramas, because you're trying to get in
reality.
these replicate, but not even replicate the emotion these characters are feeling. And I find that when you're familiar with the space that the characters exist in these dramas, it's easier to sort of, feel how they feel. You know what I mean? And the first one I want to talk about is, Chris, you and I actually had a really, really good conversation about this the other night, which actually sort of like spawned this sort of, oh, let's talk about world building. Because we talked about how this filmmaker shoots like a setting. And I'm going to talk about Chungking Express, obviously.
Oh, I see what you're going for here. Okay.
Because I feel like there are two movies where I want to talk about world building through close-ups and world building through wides. I've sort of talked about them with you that other night, but I think how to express attention to detail in space, in setting, through close-ups, nobody does it better than Wong Kar-wai. The amount of, because if you pay attention to Chungking Express, or we can also loop in The Mood for Love, because we were also talking about that film as well. The amount of attention to detail that Wong Kar-wai does, like that he puts to just specific objects in the frame, right, Chris? Do you want to like, because you
Yeah.
were sort of explaining this to
Yeah.
me, and it like blew my mind. Please tell me more about this.
Yeah. So, one thing you may notice if you're watching Chunky Express, among many things, is that Wong Kar Wai has this like this affectation for capturing like insert shots of these little like sensory elements within the scene that he's capturing. So, for instance, right? I mean, like throughout the film, you might notice that he has this obsession with clocks. He always likes taking a shot of a clock, a calendar, time, anything to do with time. He likes fucking around with. But you know, for example, if in a scene where a character is like smoking a cigarette, or a scene maybe they're holding a drink, or I don't know, like watching a movie. You know, sometimes he'll just get a close up with that cigarette smoke leaking out. He'll get a close up of like the water, like maybe like just gently shaking, you know, in the glass, or maybe you know, if the character is watching TV, maybe a close up shot of like the static in the corner of a TV. I don't know, just anything that. And the way that I've kind of understood that is that that's Wong's way of kind of capturing these little enigmatic moments of reality that I think stand out to us as humans, but we're kind of unconscious of.
Yeah.
So, for example, like, yeah, exactly. So, like, you know, when you're smoking a cigarette, you might not notice like the smoke all the time, but
Right.
when you're recollecting it as a memory or anything like that, those little like details really stick out. On top
Right.
of just, of course, like whatever the conversation was about. But like, yeah, something about those little seemingly insignificant details Wong loves to capitalize on. And like you said, Ethan, that technique in relation to the movie, as well as the many techniques he uses with editing, as well as like the, you know, like the step printed imagery where everything's kind of shot at a lower shutter speed and then doubled in frames. It's a whole thing. But yeah, it all of that works towards building this kind of sensory experience that I think as an audience member you might um like you might lose a sense of like clarity in what you're seeing, but I think you will gain a sense of feeling and texture for the world that he's creating, which works in my opinion. And it's kind of crazy of him to be able to like create a world while kind of blurring our understanding of the world too, if that makes sense. Especially if you've never been to Hong Kong, I imagine it's very vivid. But to me, it's like that's kind of what it's like.
But that's the thing. I've never been to Hong Kong, but I get a feeling of these shops and markets and apartment buildings, you know, that you see throughout Chungking Express, and or like the bars, you know, that he goes to in the beginning of the movie, you know, or like the baseball diamond that he goes and runs around, like the attention detail to the gate and the rain going off the gate and stuff like
Exactly.
that, you know.
Yeah.
I find it spectacular, and you know, the Hong Kong, like the city is a character in
Hong
his
Kong!
films. Hong Kong, is sort of a character in his films, you know, and so he values it as much as a character, you know, and so he tries his best to sort of let the setting speak for itself, let the world speak for itself, you know, and it's incredible. Brandon, do you have any sort of like real worlds that like when you watch these films, like these dramas, that you're just like you're sucked into the space that these characters exist in?
Yeah, and I don't know if you're gonna agree with it necessarily, but let me go with like Chloe Zhao's Nomadland.
Nomadland.
No, that's a great one. Are you kidding me?
That's a good
Yeah.
one. That is a good choice.
Because it feels like it's you know, even though she's always on the move, you see all these different spaces within the American Southwest and West.
Yeah.
And in that sense, like, and it's using like this almost like third cinema-esque like perspective. Like most of these people are real people, not actors. You know, other than David Strathairn and Frances McDormand, like most of the actors in the film are not actors; they're real people that just happen to have connections to this life.
Yeah.
Of this nomadic life. And I think that's really interesting because it gives the audience this sense of like a place among all this chaos and what is something that is the opposite of stable. and that is in itself a world, but a world on the go, which is kind of why I was like, maybe it's like it's definitely building a location and a place, but building a world, like I'm trying to think about for a character specifically does it, and I'm like, well, these are in real life, like we're just passing by people every day, having short interactions and stuff. So I think that works well enough here in this case, but that was my number one choice for the real world.
That's
a really good choice.
Chris,
By the way, really quick tidbit about Chloe Zhao. Did you guys know that she's developing a futuristic sci-fi western version of Dracula?
What?
I'm worried.
Chloe Zhao.
I googled it. Yeah, it's real. Eternals director Chloe Zhao is working on that Dracula movie that was first announced in 2021. At the time, it was reported that the film would be a futuristic sci-fi western of the original name.
Whoa, that's cool.
Which, like, hey, let's see it. I want to see it.
See it. That sounds insane. Dracula, it's like western and like futuristic. Whoa.
Yeah. Real quick before I jump into my real world one, I just really want to quickly just throw in these two because I forgot about them.
Yeah.
For sci-fi, I want to throw in Snowpiercer.
Yeah, I said that.
Brandon already said that.
Oh, you said okay, and Wall-E.
Wall-E.
I was thinking like Animatrix because it's like in my mind right now.
That's a good one.
Even though it's animated.
Is that the best Matrix movie?
No, it's second best. I like the Resurrections better.
Resurrections.
Just trying to think.
But that one's.
I'm trying to think which movie I want to put up for like a good version of a reality one.
Ethan, do you think Beach Bum would be a good one?
Oh. Yes. Honestly,
I was thinking about that.
That was going to be my next category, is sort of like these sort of neo-noir films starring really low-life characters from a really grounded perspective of the worlds that they exist in.
Like a Florida Project sort of thing.
I was going to say The Nice Guys. I think they do a fantastic job of realizing 1977 Los Angeles, or The Big Lebowski for Los Angeles in the 90s, or Once Upon a Time in Hollywood for Los Angeles in the 60s, you know?
But living with Ethan these last 2 weeks, I've realized Ethan has developed like a strong affectation
for those
like
three movies.
For the slacker noir in the late 20th century.
Yeah. Cutter's Way is a good one. That's Los Angeles in the 80s. Look, I've almost unlocked all the decades of LA. But then Beach Bum with the Keys in Miami. It's fantastic. And Florida Project, that's a good one too. Of just like those just side of the road hotels you see on the way to Disney World, you know, that are just in the middle of nowhere, but people live there and have lives there, you know. After Hours for New York City at night, I think, is a really good one.
I thought like Be Kind Rewind would be another. I don't know if you guys agree with that.
Yeah.
Like building a small community, not in terms of your noir-esque.
No. I've just in terms of world building. I'm trying to remember though what the world looks like. All I remember is the video store.
It was a city.
I think the reason that it's like it might not stand out as much is because the movie is set in the real world, like there isn't like a twist that really brings, because it's, for example, like say with a movie like Lebowski, for instance, it is very much set in the 90s and it was shot in the 90s. And is in a classic place of 90s Americana, but Be Kind Rewind is set in, what is it, the 2000s?
Yeah. Early 2000s.
And was made in 2000s. But would any of us go as far as to say that is a classic piece of 2000s Americana? In the same way that, say, Lebowski is for the 90s.
It's tough because I think if you're viewing it in a vacuum without, like, in that era, I think no. But I think if you rewatch that movie, like there are going to be movies, like view it as itself a period piece where you have like video stores, and this is the start. I mean, really the start of like the internet era and the drifting away from like neighborly connections, because now people don't know their neighbors. Like, I don't know my neighbors. I'm sure you guys really don't know your neighbors beyond a simple conversation.
Yeah.
And back then, it just seemed like everybody in your community, in your city, even on your street, you knew and had like a relationship with.
Yeah.
And I think this film sort of like recalls that. And it's kind of a nostalgic for it before even it happened, where this went away, you know?
That was the thing that was really lost in our generation, you know?
Yeah.
Of really knowing your neighbors. Because, I don't know anybody who really
know thy neighbor. Yeah.
Who really truly loves thy neighbor. But, like, my parents are always confused when they're like, you don't hang out with your neighbors, you know? Or you don't talk to your neighbors a lot. I'm like, not really, because I feel like we're passing through all the time, you know?
And you wouldn't want to, like,
every time I see my neighbor is when I'm going somewhere, and we're there, like, when each person is leaving or coming, you know? That's the only time I ever see my neighbors.
Yeah, I also think because of the era that we grew up in with technology and our awareness of dangers, I feel like stranger danger is a little bit more intense on our generation, and also the just the simple fact that, like, you know, on a day-to-day basis, you don't necessarily find yourself thinking like, oh, I want to go over and knock on my neighbor's door, because you don't want to impose.
See what's up,
right?
Yeah.
You know, I want to coin a new
also,
term
how many
here.
people are brave?
That's true. There are some brave people out there. I want to coin a new term. We're talking about, like, these movies that captured the essence of a place, of a world, if you will, at the time that it was filmed. Like, we were talking about Lebowski, or Ethan. We watched Superbad recently. Superbad captures the 2000s to a T. I feel like. We should. I feel like we can call those movies like world capturing movies. But world building is when you either go from scratch or take a version of our planet and manipulate something within it, you know. But world capturing is just straight up within the times.
In that sense, like, it has to build upon something.
Enworlding, that's one of our favorite words, isn't it? And I think that's the umbrella
Miss
term.
Fury.
I think that's the umbrella term for both those, because the concept of
world
rebuilding is
rebuilding,
getting the viewer to believe that they're in that world, you know.
Yeah,
essentially.
That's true. That's very true.
Where would Triangle of Sadness fall?
Yeah. What do you say, Chris?
Wait, I think if I had to put forward my reality pick, then, but the thing is, a lot of my reality picks have like a fantastical element added to it, but outside of that one fantastical element, it doesn't really do much. Like for example, Pirates of the Caribbean. I think that movie captures that era of history very well, minus of course the fantastical elements. But like, really think about that. I swear to God, and you can quote me on this. Pirate films are the hardest films to produce possible. Period piece, on the water, costumes, all of that, music, acting, and it's like a niche thing, and it's also, but I think the big thing is they're filming on water. You know how hard that shit is?
Yeah.
There's also really less of a historical record of like what it's like to be on the sea.
So visually.
High seas.
Yeah. Last Voyage of the Demeter.
No. Why?
The Green Knight. That's a good one.
All right, let's get into period pieces, shall we? Then, should that be our next sort of?
All right, let's.
Of recapturing. Do you want to start with the period piece, Chris?
Okay. I just threw in Green Knight, but I want to talk about Babylon.
Yep, that was mine.
Okay.
Okay. 1920. Let's all right. Roll it back. 1920s Hollywood. You are at a party with the hottest people in the film industry, the music industry. Everyone's there. Everyone's doing drugs. Nothing's regulated. It doesn't matter because movies are awesome, and we're doing just fine. Oh, Damien Chazelle. Okay, so Babylon, yes, is this movie from the from the 1920s, about the 1920s. It captured the 1920s. Babylon is this movie that kind of details the rise and fall of the 1920s in Hollywood's history. It's a movie all about like the decadence and the exploitation and the kind of depravity in the industry, but also the magic behind the screen and why this is meaningful to people. Yeah, I don't know. The movie does such a good job of making me like, because this vision of Hollywood in the 1920s is something I've always known. Oh, right, the Roaring Twenties. That's like a thing, right? What a time that must have been in history. But I've never really had it visualized for me in the way that Damon Chazelle achieves in Babylon. Sure,
Yeah.
I'm sure there are movies out there that do it as well, but this is the one that has stood out to me, or at least among the few I've seen. And my God, Babylon does such a great job. I think it's also easy to forget that even in the 1920s, they still kind of talk like we do today. Granted, slang is different and whatnot, but it's not like they're like, a whole other like dialect or something, like in like the 1700s or whatever. Even then, they still speak like you could have a very easy conversation with someone from this era.
Yeah.
Um, Ethan, do you have anything you want to say about Babylon?
I just want to say, just Damien Chazelle. That movie is supposed to emphasize how dramatic things have changed since since Hollywood basically started. I think that's why
Yeah.
people often criticize how crude the movie is and how over the top it is and how maximalist it is. That's sort of the point, because this director is trying to convey that, like, when movies started out, like, these are people, like, from vaudeville acts and from, a bunch of theater kids came together in the middle of desert and made their own, like, little Coachella of making movies and stuff like that, made their own little crazy society that made them a lot of money, so they were able to be even crazier,
Yeah.
And it wasn't until sound was implemented in the film and people had to always carry around personas and acting, as sort of public figures, did that really change, because back in the silent era, all people cared about were the looks on their face, If you looked like an
Yeah.
actor, then didn't matter what you sound like, didn't matter how you acted, didn't matter your personality, it was just about how you could look, And
Yeah.
that caused chaos, and you can just tell how it just feels like another world, through the world building, through the shots that Giselle is able to get of these extravagant houses in this desert in the middle of nowhere, because that's what Los Angeles used to be, which is crazy, or the valley. um and it's just, I love it. I love it so much, so much. I'm so glad you brought this up, because yeah, it's that film's just gonna keep getting a masterpiece status as time goes on. I'm calling it now. The haters are gonna die out, and it's gonna become something beautiful, man. I can't wait. Brandon,
Brandon, what do you
gotta
have to
rewatch
throw
it,
in here?
bro. You gotta rewatch it.
I will. I have a musical
Oh.
that's a period piece.
What is it?
I am picking Les Miserables.
The 2012 one?
Yeah.
Never
Like
seen
the
it.
song.
yeah. Les Miserables.
Frites alors.
Well, I mean,
C'est la vie.
with Les Mis, it's like it's the grungy French back alleys during the Revolution and Reign of Terror, and I think it's fascinating to see like the scale and scope at which this goes for, when a lot of musicals would rather just stick to a much smaller locale, I think, or even a more of a fantastical one, you can look at like a modern film like Hairspray, which is just a town or a city, or Greece for that example, or Mamma Mia is just like a hotel in Greece.
Mamma Mia.
But with Les Mis, you've got a whole city that is pretty, I would say, pretty accurately pictured and photographed as it was back in the day, based on what we do know about the French Revolution, have seen in paintings or in artistic renderings. And I love that. I love that aspect of that film. The costuming is perfect. There's like it's a city that feels degraded and not just like a studio lot, I think often people will look at a film like this and see, oh, well, like it was made entirely in a studio. something like a Hitchcock movie from the 50s or 60s. Like it has that same aesthetical feel, except with more close-up camera angles and such.
Mm-hmm.
But I get more from it than just that. It does feel like a space that they've transported me back in time like 200, 300 years to this era in history. Even if there's constant singing, and that might grate some ears.
But it
Ethan,
grows.
you'll fucking hate this movie, Ethan.
I haven't seen it, and I don't think I really plan on seeing it. If I'm gonna be honest.
Yeah. You know what's one thing I think will drive Ethan mad about this movie, Brandon? On top of the singing,
they probably have like 3 minutes of spoken dialogue.
there's probably like literally like 3 minutes total
you
of actual
serious?
dialogue. The entire movie is singing. The entire movie. But another thing that I think will drive Ethan crazy is they all have English accents.
Yeah.
And they're French. Oh,
And they're French.
Man, I hate that.
And they're all
so
English
much.
actors.
I hate when French people have English accents. Why? Give them French accents.
I think it just doesn't fit the music, if I'm being honest. The melodic.
Well, then they shouldn't have written the music for that time. If French people can't sing it, you know? Come on, man. Anyways, Brandon, do you know any of the songs from the movie?
I know a couple.
do.
Can you guys duet one right now for the listeners?
All right, want
As a
to
treat?
do One Day More?
Yeah, sure.
You lead, I'll follow.
One day more.
One day more to heaven.
Put in the bud. We'll
We will be ready
Why are
for
you
these
singing right up
school
to the mic,
boys.
Brandon?
We
You're
will-
peaking so
We
much.
will serve and live by one day more. That's all we got.
That's good. Yeah, that was good. Thank you for that.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're very welcome.
Yeah.
I have a couple of. I mean, we're kind of getting to the hour mark here. I do have a couple of honorable mentions, or like movies we could talk about, but we could be here all day because there's so many movies.
That is true. There's a lot of them.
All right. Should we just move on to honorable mentions? Unless you guys have any one that you're
I
really
have
compelled to talk
one
deeply
more
about.
that I'm really compelled to talk about because I feel like it's a mixture of two categories that we've already sort of discussed, which is, it's based in our real world, but it's a place that doesn't exist. I'm gonna talk about Wes Anderson's The Grand Budapest Hotel.
The Grand Budapest Hotel. I have that on my
And
list
just
too.
Wes Anderson as a world builder in general, because he creates worlds like no other filmmaker, in the way it's almost like he's adapting a travel brochure. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's very direct to the point, explaining how this world is and how it works, almost with like stage direction, there's a bit of theatricality to it as well. But I think no other film has like really created such a in creative world than Grand Budapest Hotel. Asteroid City comes pretty close in my opinion, but I think Grand Budapest Hotel, just in terms of the production design, is just extravagant, and the way time is framed within that film. There's like stories within stories within stories, and the aspect ratio changes for each story, thus condensing the space and creating the world around the aspect ratio. I just think it's phenomenal. And nobody ever has done it like him, and nobody ever will. And that's something that's really special, that we get to be alive in the time that this artist is creating worlds in this way, that is completely unique to himself. That I feel like we have to shout him out, and I feel like Grand Budapest Hotel is his most shining example of this. What do you guys think?
Well, you guys both know my feelings about Wes Anderson as of late. For anyone who might not know, Wes is one of those directors who I deeply respected. When I first came into film, I loved a lot of his movies, but for some reason, pretty much ever since Grand Budapest, he's kind of fallen off for me.
But which ones have you seen?
I have not seen French Dispatch or Asteroid City or Alabama. So literally after that, I saw Grand Budapest and I was like, I'm out. I loved it, but then I'm done.
That makes no fucking sense at all. But I'll respect
It's
your
pretty
opinion.
absurd. Not
It's-
gonna lie.
Oh man,
He's a bit too quirky for me. I can't lie.
What
Because like
about-
even
bro, you
even
watch
when
Big
okay,
Bang Theory.
what are we
That's
talking?
like the quirkiest show
Hey, that's
ever.
not quirky. That's not quirky.
Yes,
It's
it
dorky.
is.
It's dorky, and I'm
All
dorky,
right.
but I'm not quirky.
Sure.
But yeah. But I do respect the guy. I don't hate him or anything. He's just not my cup of tea. Not my cup of tea. Not my cup of tea.
Not my cup of tea.
But no, I do respect him a lot, and I know he's a very gifted filmmaker. It's just I sometimes just can't.
Do you think
handle it.
film school ruined him for you?
Maybe it was that class.
Do you think
with
if we did
fucking
take that
Dester.
class, then it wouldn't have been ruined for you?
You know, honestly, maybe. But
Damn.
you know what? Maybe it's just also just a matter of me picking up his new movies and forcing myself to watch it because I just haven't.
I don't
I'd love
think you
to
should
rewatch
close
it.
yourself off to the chance and opportunity of two really good
No,
movies.
yeah.
3
Dude,
really
wait,
good
which one do
movies.
you which one do you not like, Brandon?
Uh,
Isle? I'm gonna guess Isle.
No, I think they're all like 4-star movies. It's just like I really think Asteroid City is like a step above the other two. And French Dispatch, like Isle of Dogs does feel like it's more so playing in line with the normal Wes Andersonisms. And French Dispatch is structurally very different.
Oh.
And then Asteroid City is, I think, also very structurally different from his other films. So,
Mhm.
and it's very meta. It's very much a commentary on COVID and isolation and stuff like that.
And like the worth of an artist because of that.
That too.
Because of the existential crisis that COVID gave them, you know.
So not only COVID and the strike have both done wonders for that movie, if I'm
Yeah.
being honest. So
Y'all, when the strike's over, the art that is going to be created out of that is going to be.
they may
something
not be
else.
writing first. They may not be writing for studios, but I can guarantee there are probably some writers writing out there for them.
Writers are probably they're probably writing on independently on their own right now, like stories about their reaction to this, you know, and it's gonna be
Mhm.
it's gonna be primo. I don't think I have any other honorable mentions because I really just want to talk about Babylon and okay, actually I do have a couple of honorable mentions, so let's get to those before we wrap it up. I gotta mention Hayao Miyazaki as a filmmaker himself, just all of his films, the way you know he puts in attention to detail. I'm sad that I didn't get to talk about more this episode, but just pick one, and I agree with you. You know what I mean? Let's see, Alien. Oh man, I love
Alien's
the world
very
building
good.
in the first Alien and Aliens. That one's good too. This one, I think the world building. I talked to Chris about this the other night when we were talking about Wong Kar-wai, but a filmmaker who I think does fantastic world building by shooting wides and just like forcing you into the world through a big wide lens is Apishapong Weerasethakul, because films like Memoria, films like Uncle Boonmee Who Can Recall His Past Lives, all mostly shot in wides that are the takes hold for a long time, so you really get to feel a sense of, you know, the sound, the atmosphere. Honestly, like when I watch Uncle Boonmee, I feel like I can feel like Earth's, like I can feel the rotation of the Earth when I'm watching that movie. I feel like sometimes, and that's just like he's one of the best in worlderners, you know, that I can think of. I think I'm just gonna keep it at there because I bet you guys have tons more. Brandon, do you want to shout out some?
Brandon, you go. Yeah.
Yeah. We never really touched on fantasy or horror world building. So fantasy wise, I can't stress enough that as much as I'm not a fan of the early films in this franchise, the Harry Potter movies have really good world building, especially in those first few.
Butterbean.
Cabin in the Woods, really interesting
Cabin in the
world
Woods
building
is
there.
good.
What's another one? M. Night has some really good world building in his movies.
He does. He does.
It's Knock at the Cabin, subtle world
After
building.
Earth.
Old.
Old.
The Thing
Beach
has
building.
really good self-contained world building.
Yeah,
It does.
It
really
gets
does.
you. really familiar with that Antarctica research station. Outpost
And A
31.
Matter of Life and Death is my other one. Where I think, that film has world building of the about the afterlife, but also about like living in that time period, which is what was it like the 40s when it was made. So also really good stuff on that front because it's more philosophical.
Yeah, that is good. All right, Chris,
Nice.
you want to round it up?
I've got
with
a
your
bunch.
honorable mentions.
I've got a bunch. I'm gonna rattle these off. Real quick. I cannot believe that no one said Lord of the Rings.
Oh, Frodo, I freaking forgot.
Technically, it's not the filmmaker who did it. So if we're
Well, you could
splitting
say that with Harry
hairs.
Potter
But they
as well. man.
but they executed it.
I guess you're right.
You could say that
I
with
don't
any
know.
adaptation.
Okay,
we
let's keep
talked
going. I got Children of Men. I got Mad Max Fury Road.
Yeah.
I got The Lobster.
Ooh, that one's good.
I got Ethan. I'm surprised you didn't say John Wick.
Oh, that one's good.
The Criminal World. Brandon, you might not agree with this, but I really think Batman Returns is really good world building.
Oh, that one's
Honestly, I will say the same about Batman Forever. I will say the same about Batman. That movie has good world building.
Tim
I think
Burton's
the only
Gotham is
Batman-
awesome.
I think the only good Batman movie with world building is the first Batman from '89.
How about The Batman?
No.
No. Oh, that one's great.
Huh? You don't like the world building in the new Batman?
It just feels like, just feels like New York, even though it's not.
Continue, Chris.
Okay, I'm gonna rattle off the next few really quickly. Spirited Away, Kung Fu Panda, Guardians of the Galaxy, Monsters Inc., Truman Show, Wreck-It Ralph, Robots, and last but not least,
Robots.
the Lego Movie.
Yes. Those
Lego
are
Movie's
those-
really good world building.
But also robots. I'm still thinking about robots. Why didn't we not talk about that more?
Robots is really good.
Yeah,
I love that movie's so good,
it's a good one. Well,
so fun.
that'll do it for this episode of Stacked, everybody. We talked about some amazing worlds. I hope you were in world and
In world and
I hope you might be, because the neighbors upstairs were dragging their chairs across the floor for some parts of the podcast. So you're probably gonna feel like you're sitting in my chair and hearing people dragging furniture across the floor. So I hope you get that experience and really be in world and stack. Should I upload this one as a VR video? We did that for Jungles and Dragons once, where we just uploaded an audio podcast, but in VR, and it was just the still image that you could just but it was just like mapped all around you. Anyways, nobody's paying attention. Chris is on his phone, Brandon's fiddling with something. Let's just end the episode. All right, thank you so much for listening, guys. You got any final thoughts about worlds and movies and just anything? I don't know. Say something. What's up, guys?
Not really.
Okay.
I want to build a world. I want to build this world from the ground up.
All right, then go to the sandbox.
just-
You fucking.
I've heard in Mormonism you get to create your own
All right.
world if
Cut.
you follow it.
Cut.